Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Understanding the CARES Act and COVID-19 Updates. Before I turn things over, I would like to take a moment to thank RSPA's Platinum sponsors for 2020. Without their sponsorship of RSPA, webinars like this would not be possible. Our 2020 Platinum sponsors are Blue Star, Heartland, ScanSource, and Shift4. I would now like to introduce John Kirk, the President and CEO of the RSPA. John, the floor is yours.
Appreciate that, Kathy. You know, the one thing I will tell you is we appreciate what you guys are doing because you've got the tough challenge of balancing the number one concern, and that's safety and health of all, while you tend to the realities of protecting your team and your business. And that is a very difficult task that you've got. We know it's a heavy weight, and you're doing a heck of a job. And we thank you for being on this webinar. And just know this, that we've spent a lot of time studying this bill when it was signed into law on Friday. Bob's done a terrific job of providing you some insight. Secretary Mnuchin refers to this as a bridge, and this is a bridge, but it's a bridge with a lot of lanes, and we've got to figure out what lanes are best for you, and that's what this webinar is all about. And when you step back and look at the big picture of this very comprehensive law now that we can leverage to move our businesses forward, it's pretty basic when you really think about it. It's designed to keep businesses intact, keep workers employed, keep consumers in a place where they are protected as well as in a position to spend when a rebound is in order. And this is not a bailout program, as you guys know. This is a bridge with many lanes, and it's appropriate because demand was halted artificially by this terrible health crisis. And you guys, in my view, you're heroes on the front line. And our effort today was to just help you take the first step as you start to choose what lane could have the biggest impact for you. So I want to thank our chairwoman, Chelsea Paulson, who's been very involved and supportive through this process. And I want to thank our team, and I want to thank our community, and I really want to thank our general counsel, Bob Goldberg. I want to thank everybody in this community because you guys are special. And turn it over to Bob.
You all for taking time to join the RSPA Academy today. I know these are difficult times, but RSPA continues to sit back and try to help you get through these complex COVID-19 opportunities. They are complex, they're difficult to understand, they're not fully developed, but hopefully RSPA on a continuing basis such as this can continue to give you the information you need to make intelligent decisions as to what is best for your company. Since our last webinar, where we spoke about the COVID-19, we have had the CARES Act passed, which is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. This has some exceptional opportunities for resellers to use in their business during this difficult time in order to maintain employees and maintain and remain open. Today's agenda will look at a business plan. I'll talk a little bit about that. I will remind you of the enhanced unemployment benefits. We'll talk about the CARES Act, which has the Paycheck Protection Program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loans and Grants, and tax credits. And then I'll give you a few suggestions as to how you can continue and prepare for the future. So why don't we get started? You don't need to look at me, but you can write down my email address. I'm working remotely, so email is the best way to get in touch with me. And I'm available to answer your questions that you have, and look forward to hearing from you. Again, my email address is bob.goldberg@sfnr.com. Let's get started. We spoke in our last webinar about a disaster plan, and I encourage you to keep notes of the various events that took place during your reaction to the COVID-19 crisis. Those things could later be used to help you in the event that there's a tornado, flood, fire, hurricane, whatever disaster hits you. And I continually wish to remind you how important it is that you walk away from this better prepared for the next time it happens. As Governor Cuomo was saying today in his press conference, this will happen again. We will have something else. So get yourself prepared. But I also want to speak to you about a business plan right now. The business plan you wrote a year ago, 5 years ago, is no longer applicable to what we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. So there are two factors in this business plan. The first is the health and safety of your office and your team. We went through that. We talked about the steps you can take to sanitize, remote workers, making sure your team has effective protections. I'm very concerned with technicians who go into the marketplace, that they have gloves, that they hopefully can have a mask, if not a bandana, scarf or something, and disinfected, and also that your customers will disinfect equipment prior to their arrival. I want to encourage you to develop a succession plan as to the various duties and responsibilities that exist at your business. If one of your employees is absent, if your controller, your accounts payable, your CFO is not there, who's going to pick that up? Never too early to start cross-training or too late to start cross-training individuals. So if somebody becomes unavailable, you have someone trained and ready to take their place. And again, with your employees, communication is the key. We need to communicate regularly, honestly, and realistically. I think we've seen that, how important that is alone with the messages we've received from the White House, where initially the concern was not as great as the one yesterday, where we heard that approximately 240,000 people may lose their lives as a result of COVID-19. So what about the health and safety of your business? Let's talk about that for a minute. I would make a list of your key customers. I'd reach out to them and I would share with them what your 2, 3, 4 month plan for services, what you have available, how you're going to do it, and how they should communicate with you to best effectuate the service needs that they have. I would do it with your key customers, your major customers, reach out to them at this point and have that discussion with them. Again, communication the key. Keep them advised and keep them alert. Take the time to emphasize with them the need for heightened cybersecurity. The Payment Industry Council won't go away during this. So we still have to remember how important it is throughout the chain to maintain security and with networks and servers. More and more people are using remote access to communicate, to get into the office archives, and it's important that we make sure that each of those access points is secure. Each remote access point is a point of vulnerability, both for your business and your customers, and you should emphasize that, and there may even be some services you can provide to help them. Take the time now. You should have enough experience for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks to see what your cash flow is going to look like. Do a cash flow projection for the next 6 months, because I think that might help you in terms of what you decide is the best government support that you take advantage of. There are a lot of programs out there for existing loan adjustment. If you're renting your facility, talk to your landlord. If you have a bank relationship with a line of credit, a loan, or any other financial instruments, speak with your bank and see what they can do to help you through this situation. People are bending to help people and try to maintain businesses and maintain cash flow. So look at what you have, make adjustments, and proceed from there. Now, continue with your business plan. The federal, state, and city programs. I'm here in Chicago, where the city of Chicago has $100,000 loans and $10,000 grants available. Make sure you're aware of all of them. They vary. Obviously, federal applies throughout the United States. State by state will vary, and city by city will as well. The administrative guidelines for these programs are being presented on a rolling basis. I will point out some incorrect information that's come out, and you should not be surprised if on Wednesday you hear one thing and Thursday it's changed because of the rolling basis of the guidelines that are being provided. First and foremost, today, April 1st, you are required to have in your business posted, and I would suggest you share this poster announcement with your employees. This is available for download at the Department of Labor. It's the Employees' Rights, Paid Sick Leave, and Expanded Family and Medical Leave under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That was the legislation we spoke about last time. This needs to be posted just like your EEOC posters or anything else in your lounge and where your time clock is, whatever you have, and whatever site you use to communicate with your employees. And remember that if in fact your employees are working remotely, that you should probably email this to them as well. Now, what does this say about paid leave entitlements? It has the various categories under the entitlements, 100% for qualifying reasons 1 through 3, which are quarantine, self-quarantine, or symptoms, which would provide up to $511 daily and a $5,100 total. A 2/3 for qualifying reasons 4 and 6, which is basically taking care of somebody else or experiencing a similar condition specified by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. 12 weeks of paid sick leave and expanded family leave. Now, this one, I believe that the poster is incorrect unless they've changed it, and I haven't seen it. It's $200 daily, but the max is $10,000 in the law. But that is another one of the things that's available under the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. You can get these paid leave entitlements, and people should look to see if that expansion of the Family Leave Act is something that they wish to consider. Now, you can continue to pay health care under this, and there'll be opportunities to recoup that. And there's also the Paid Sick Leave Act, the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, which we discussed last week, where there's 80 hours of paid sick leave for a 2-week period available to employees. If they're quarantined by the federal, state, or a city, they're advised to quarantine, and the first one was basically a shelter at home, or if they showed symptoms, and it's the same amounts of money that I talked about, the $511 daily or the $200 daily, depending on who it is. So don't forget that these things are available. What I do want to emphasize to you is that you can't double dip. Each of these programs do not allow to get credits, compensation for the same thing from 2 different programs. So if you're looking at the Payment Protection Program, which we will shortly, and are going to get reimbursed for certain of these costs there, you won't be able to do it here as well. So post this poster. It's due April 1st. And that's another one of those things that changed on a daily basis. The law said it would become effective X number of days, 15 days afterwards. The federal government counted the first day that it was signed, not the 24 hours the next day, which we usually do. So you saw a lot of things that said April 2nd. It really is April 1st. Okay, you are all basically a essential U.S. business. You are providing technology services to groceries, gas stations, perhaps banks. You're providing those services, and as a service, a provider to an essential business, you are an essential business, so you can remain open. I still encourage you, the maximum number of employees that you can, in fact, work remotely, you should encourage them to do that and work with people to do that so we maintain our social separation. There is an essential worker letter that RSPA has posted in conjunction with their COVID-19 materials. Basic is a letter that you should print on company letterhead, give to any employees who are going to be driving or commuting for business, that if they're stopped, they have a letter from their employer stating they're an essential business and what it is. I talked about the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, the extended family leave. Again, that's 10 weeks. I've got it there at the 10,000, unlike the poster, and the 10 days paid sick leave at the 511 and the 200, with maxes, as you see, is 2,051. There's tax credits available for these amounts. And when I get to the tax credit issue, I have to emphasize those tax credit benefits will vary according to your business. And we'll speak about that a little later. Do not forget the enhanced unemployment benefits that are available. It may be in the best interest of an employee, may not be in your best interest on a payment protection program to terminate an individual, but they have greatly enhanced the benefits for unemployment. Typically, the period for compensation for unemployment was half a year, 26 weeks. Now it's been extended an additional 13 weeks to 39. And then in addition to what your state gives, and this is an important thing because the states vary greatly in the amount of money that they provide. A state like New Jersey awards people for unemployment compensation on a weekly basis. I believe it's $716. The state of Florida, on a weekly basis for unemployment compensation, awards $275. But and again, those benefits vary from state to state. That's why Congress was concerned when they implemented the $600 additional per week, which come out of the federal budget, which is on top of any state benefit. So it is conceivable that someone in New Jersey who's getting $700 under the New Jersey unemployment compensation statute, add 600 is getting $1,300 on a weekly basis, may in fact earn more than they would had they remained employed and working. And that was one of the concerns. But it was easier just to do a blanket increase, and that's what it did. This 600 increase per week will end on July 31st. Again, I want to emphasize, there are a number of drop-dead dates in here when these programs are supposed to cease and no longer be effective. But understand this is phase 3. Congress is already speaking of phase 4 and is anticipated that if the crisis remains, that those amounts and dates will be extended. For unemployment, there are some criteria, and this one strikes me because an individual has to be able to work, certainly that's most people will, available for work, they are, and seeking employment. I do not know how effective, we've all seen that groceries, Amazon delivery services are looking for employees. There are employment opportunities out there. I don't know how strict that the government will be on that, but the law says that you have to be able, available, and seeking. The benefits vary by state to state and duration, but look at that. All right, let's turn now to what was passed last weekend. I believe it was Friday. 880 pages of legislation was passed. There's carrots in there for a lot of people. Let's find out which ones are for us. The $2 trillion Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Security Act, the CARE Act, is phase 3, as I mentioned. It is designed, and remember this, to keep employees employed and call back any who may have been laid off. Remember, that's the goal. They want you to keep your employees employed if you can, and that may be even if you're quarantined, that they work remotely. People can still work remotely. I've had a lot of questions along those lines. We talked about dispatching technicians from home. We talked about salespeople, doing Zoom and FaceTime conversations. There's all kinds of opportunities. These benefits are Small Business Administration provided, the SBA. There's a loan program. There's immediate cash assistance. That's $10,000 in your pocket under certain circumstances. And those grants and assistance is available for payroll, vacation, PTO, payment of health benefits, mortgage interest, not principal interest, rent if you entered your lease prior to February 15th, utilities, I have a question, cell phones, I believe are included in utilities. I would also say broadband most likely is as well. Those are utilities that you need, but from third parties to operate your business. And interest on debt incurred prior to February 15th. So you can't run out and get a loan to do that. Let's talk about the key provision here, the Payment Protection Program. This program is unique in several respects. Most of you have less than 500 employees, and that number includes part-time employees. Most of our VAR members easily fit into that. You need to have been in business prior to February 15th of 2020. The benefits or the program is retroactive to February 15th, and at this point extends to June 30th of 2020. Again, recall that can be extended depending on the crisis. We now have shelter in place, social separation requirements through the end of April. That easily can go into May. Who knows what kind of protection we're going to have to take after that, but those dates can change. Now, what is this loan? How much can you get? The maximum loan is 2.5 times the average total monthly payroll up to 10 million. And if any of you are over 10 million, give me a call. I'd like to talk to you. And that payroll includes salary, commission, vacation, PTO and sick, health insurance premiums, any severance you paid, state and local taxes, not federal taxes. It excludes compensation over 100,000. So if you as the CEO of the company are making 125,000, 100,000 would be included in your total monthly payroll. The 25,000 above would be excluded. Federal taxes, as I said, are excluded, and wages under the Family First that we just talked about earlier. So they won't let you double dip. You can't put it back in here and also get reimbursed under the other program, under the Family First program. The maximum interest is 4%. It's been coming at 3.7. There's a 10-year term on the loan, and there is no interest or penalty for 6 months. Now, furthermore, these loans are guaranteed and backed by the Small Business Administration, but they're being administered and entered into with the current lenders that are doing Section 7A loans. Those are the typical Small Business Administration loans you may be familiar with. So it's a lender that's been approved by the SBA. I put a link there and where you can find a match, one near you. Chances are it's your existing bank already. If not, this is someone you should be reaching out to if you're looking at the Paycheck Protection Program. This is the bank is someone you should be looking to for guidance and help. Factors that aren't included is the repayment ability. You could have terrible credit. You can have a Dun & Bradstreet of a negative 7,000, and it doesn't matter. The ability is not a factor, and loan availability from other sources, which typically was an SBA factor, that is not a consideration. There's no collateral and no personal guarantee up to $25,000 loan. After that time, there could be. Now, excuse me, at the end of this, when you're looking to have forgiveness of your loan, you're going to have to make a good faith certification. This is where people who are not doing this honestly and properly will get hung up because they'll make a certification that wasn't true and accurate. You have to state that the loan was due to economic conditions. You needed it for ongoing operations. You retained workers. You needed funds to pay your mortgage or lease or utilities. And again, there can be no duplicative loans. In other words, if you have a 7A loan or if you have a Family First loan, you can't use those amounts. You can't double dip. SBA says, and if you believe them, they'll turn these around, or at least your lender will turn these around in 10 to 15 days. That's pretty good. I can tell you the deadline at this point for submitting a Paycheck Protection Program application is June 30th. Applications are available online at the Small Business Administration website, and they can begin to be filed on April 3rd of this year. That's Friday. The documents before you start doing this that you might look, and the lists I've seen have all varied and are different, are the 2019 IRS quarterly 940, 941, or 944 payroll tax reports. I think those those may all be for nonprofit, but they'll want your payroll tax reports. Payroll records for 12-month period ending on your most recent payroll date, which show the following information: gross wages for each employee, including officers, if paid with W-2, part-time of each employee, paid time off for each employee, vacation pay for each employee, family medical leave for each employee, and state and local taxes. Remember, we show those up above as being the factors. The documentation showing the total health insurance premium paid by the company include all employees and company owners. And in terms of any 401ks or retirement plans, all employees and the owners and what's been paid into them, and for any kind of retirement plan. So moving on to the Payment Protection Program. Why is this such an incredible opportunity? Well, number one, the full amount of the loan can be forgiven. It covers the amount spent in an 8-week period from the origination date of the loan. So if you put it in April 3rd, what they say, 10 to 15 days, let's say April 15th, you're approved. The amount you spend from April 15th forward would be the amount covered for forgiveness under the Paycheck Protection Program. Forgiveness is reduced in the number of employees retained. It's simple as that. If you, in the previous quarter, the previous year quarter, comparable quarter, there's 3 ways you can determine your head count. If you have 15 employees in that period and you retain 15 employees, you would be entitled to 100% forgiveness. If there was a pay reduction greater than 25%, there would be a reduction as well, commensurate to the percentage of the increase. And that would come about perhaps with furloughs. I am concerned a little bit about those commission payments because I don't think our salespeople will be in a position to earn the amounts they made previously, but I think that will be adjusted accordingly. You have to get forgiveness of that 8-week period to reverse things by June 30th, 2020. So you can continue to bring people back. You continue to make payroll adjustments. You can rehire, restore wages with no penalty, as I said. And unlike forgiveness of most debts, the forgiveness on the Paycheck Protection Program is not taxable. So this is a very attractive program. Let me show you another attractive program that you could look that came out of the CARES Act. This is the Economic Injury Disaster Loans. Again, of small businesses, 500 people or less. COVID-19 injury, pretty easy to show. Now, the last time, this is interesting, last time one of you went on to the SBA website, you were from Missouri, and you put in for a loan under a similar disaster loan, and it said Missouri wasn't covered. Well, once the pandemic was announced by the White House and the Center for Disease Control, the entire United States, Puerto Rico, are now, and the District of Columbia are now disaster areas. So that's not an issue. Now, this is interesting. Economic industry, not lost sales or profits. You're going to be injured, in fact, by the inability of your employees to come in, the shelter works, the quarantine works, mortgage payments, lost, not lost sales and profits, but lost income, we'll expect. It's an interesting they use lost sales or profits because that's expansive. But if you've been injured by, and we have, by COVID-19, we'll be fine. They will look at acceptable credit history. They will look at the ability to repay the loan. And they'll look if you're unable to obtain elsewhere, which pretty much in these circumstances will be the case. The interest rate on the economic injury disaster loan, 3.75, 30 years, $2 million maximum. There's a 12-month deferment on interest and principal, which is great. I've given you there the link for the SBA online application. Look at it there. And I think many of us might want to apply for this. And I'll get to that in a minute. As with the other, there's collateral for a loan greater than $25,000, and the owners could be responsible for a personal guarantee. The application process, the docs you'll need are the SBA Form 5, IRS Forms 8821, 4506T, tax returns, personal financial statements, scheduled liabilities, current profit loss, monthly sales on the SBA Form 1368. They are going to make you do some things, but again, the amount's attractive, it may be helpful, and it's something you will want to consider. Press the button one too many times. Here's the one that I think we should all be looking and considering about. If you file an application for an economic injury disaster loan, the one I just went over with you, you may also file for an economic injury disaster grant. That's for a small business, again, COVID-19 injury, applied economic injury disaster loan, which means you had to apply for the loan under the economic industry disaster loan in order to qualify for a disaster grant. Up to $10,000 to pay payroll, healthcare, mortgage, rent, utilities, and interest on any loans. If your economic industry disaster loan is not approved, there's no payment back of the $10,000. So if you're not approved and you fail to qualify, and this grant, by the way, SBA says you can get in 2 to 3 days, then you won't have to pay it back. If you are approved, it will be rolled into the loan that you get under the economic industry disaster loan. All right, let's look at those tax credits because I think this is something we need to be cognizant of. This is absolutely something you need to speak to your accountant about. Your accountant knows your tax position, whether you'll be profitable, unprofitable, loss carrier, all kinds of factors. These credits will have different effect based on your economic conditions. So there are tax credits, as we mentioned, to offset compensation paid. If your gross receipts are down 50% in the same quarter, there are certain tax credits you can take. 50% of wages from March 12, 20 to 12/31/20 up to $10,000 per employee. Business operation disrupted due to virus, those losses. Gross receipts we talked about. If you have more than 100 employees, it applies to employees only not working as to the amount that you can take off. If you're smaller, it includes both working and non-working employees for those factors that we talked about before, being the payroll, the healthcare, and all those things. Everyone on tax can defer, not get forgiven, the employer share of Social Security until January 1, 21, and then it's paid like it's paid in installments after that. There's also tax credits for the Family First, emergency sick leave, child care leave payments. We talked about those earlier. There's credits to offset payroll taxes up to the amount paid, FICA, employee Social Security, and Medicare taxes. And if you have insufficient payroll, taxes to offset or credit these amounts, you can get accelerated payment and actually a check in the mail. Again, these tax credits are complex, they're difficult. The IRS has issued just very few guidelines on these now. The person to talk to is your accountant as to which work best. I can't tell you today under all these programs, whether it be Family First, unpaid, paid sick leave, paycheck protection program, the disaster loan, which is best for you, but you can make that analysis with the information you have, talk to your accountant and see which one is going to apply best for you. Now, a few things to do. Make sure you're complying with family and sick leave. So if someone wants to take and extend Family Leave and Medical Act, they can. That's under the Family First. Look at what reimbursements are available from the Fed and perhaps the state and perhaps the city and see which ones you qualify for most. Look at the tax credits with your accountant, the forgivable loan under the Payment Protection Program to retain employees. That one looks to me pretty good. Enhanced unemployment benefits for laid off employees. Again, may be best for laid off employees. Contact your bank for help, number one, with any existing loans. Number two, if they're on the match list to help you with these programs. Keep aware of things on the SBA website for updates and bulletins. Yesterday, they issued a bulletin, which is very good. RSPA has posted it. It's a small business owner guide to the CARES Act. It goes about 11 pages, easy to understand, big print. You can read it in 15 minutes without any trouble. Keep updated on new regulations. We will take responsibility for that to the best of our ability. RSPA will continue to post on a daily basis. Thank you, Jim Roddy. Thank you, Chris Arnold, for doing that on a daily basis. Thank you, John Kirk, for making this a high priority. Thank you, Kathy, for this educational program. And I'm going to take a sip of water while you organize your questions. Thank you.
Okay, Bob, we've got a number of questions here, so I'll just go right into it. If we have employees still on payroll, can they resign for the enhanced unemployment benefit if it's more than they are currently paid?
Yes. Yes, they can.
Okay. And what date range is used for determining the average monthly payout?
There's three variables there. One is a quarter period, one is like a 12-month average, and one is like the payroll period prior to February 15th. There are three options, so you can look at that and determine which one is most beneficial to you.
Okay. If I own two businesses, can both businesses apply even if they share some expenses, for instance, office rent, utilities?
If both of these businesses are separately incorporated and have separate federal identification tax numbers, the answer is probably yes. And you would allocate the rent, based on each business. But they would have to be separate businesses, and one couldn't be controlled by the other. There are some rules on that. You have to look at it and look at how this is structured to determine whether or not they both can apply. I've given you a general view that if they were both separately incorporated, neither of them controlled the other, that chances are you can allocate those and apply for each if they each had a separate federal ID.
Okay. What if we were behind on payroll taxes or other debts prior to February of 2020?
You're still eligible.
With not being able to double dip in both the PPP grant and the FFCRA tax credit, is that the only way through? Is that only through the current PPP grant timeframe. Let me try that again. With not being able to double dip in both the PPP grant and the FFCRA tax credit, is that only through the current PPP grant timeframe? In other words, the end of June. The double dipping, is that only not allowed through the end of June?
You couldn't do both for that 8-week period that you're using to get reimbursement under the PPP.
Okay. As the FFCRA currently goes through December 31st of 2020, can you take a grant through CARES? Or if you take a grant through CARES, does that mean you can never use the FFCRA payroll tax credit?
Yeah, I think that's the same question. And, you know, my understanding is, and this is still has not been interpreted fully, is that for that 8-week period, you can't double dip. But it doesn't mean that you couldn't take it for periods outside of that. That is my opinion interpretation, and hopefully it stands up.
Okay. I read somewhere that contractors also counted as employees for the paid protection. Is that true?
Yes, independent contractors, self-employed, sole proprietorships, things that normally didn't qualify for unemployment and other benefits do now. It's totally expansive. And you can thank companies like Uber for that. They wanted their employees who are independent contractors to be able to participate in some of these programs and benefits.
Okay. I laid off 2 of my 6 employees. When I apply for my PPP loan, do I have to rehire them? And also, do I have to include them in my average payroll when applying?
Yeah, when you apply, you'll have to include all 6 of your employees up to $100,000 in compensation. You don't have to, there's no mandatory requirement that you have to hire them back. But if you didn't hire those 2 people back when it came to forgiveness, that's 1/3 of your employees. So you would only get forgiveness of 2/3 of the amount loaned to you. And that other 1/3 would remain a loan with that interest at what, 3.75 for what, the 10-year term, and you would be obligated to pay on that.
Okay. The process starts for small business for sole proprietors on April 3rd and self-employed April 10th. I am an LLC. How am I defined?
You're in the first group.
On the SBA grants, what is the validation process for such a brief turnaround?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what they're doing to validate each of those things, but they're using their local banks, which are going to require the documents I mentioned. And, you know, I'm sure there's guidelines along there, but as I mentioned earlier, creditworthiness is not a factor, ability to repay is not a factor, and availability elsewhere for the PPP is not a factor.
Hey, Kathy, one point, the SBA has stated that they have 30 days to publish guidelines from the date the bill was signed into law. So that was as of last Friday, the 27th of March. They have 30 days to publish guidelines. Now, Bob gave you your deadline for applying. I think you said, Bob, the end of June. We expect the SBA to publish those guidelines sooner because of the sense of urgency here when it comes to liquidity and solvency of companies. But that's the official language in the bill.
Thank you, John. That's correct.
Can we apply for both an economic injury loan and also be eligible for the payroll protection program?
Yes, I read that yes, you can, but they'll be rolled in. One will be rolled into the other if there's any excess PPP monies that aren't forgiven.
Okay. and I think we may have covered this one. What about staff that are set up as independent contractors? Can these expenses still qualify?
Yes. Answer is yes.
Okay. Okay. As an owner, I get paid primarily through owner's distributions. My paycheck is not a primary source of income. Do owner distributions in 2019 qualify as payroll?
Well, I know commissions and bonuses and other things do. That's a question for your accountant. I believe it's a broad definition, but that may be a stock distribution. 500 shares, you get a distribution based on your stock, so it may not come into play. I can't give you a definitive answer on that. I apologize.
If an employee resigns on their own, does that count against the count for retention?
Yes, it would, because it's going to be the number of employees during a period. That's a very good question. Somebody else asked me a similar question yesterday, and I said, well, what if, God forbid, one of these people die? A little difficult to rehire them. I think they've got to clarify those things under certain circumstances. And the big question is, do you have to hire back the same person? Somebody you lay off, maybe you found a better candidate along the way. If it's just a head count, it should work. If they look at payroll records, maybe not.
Are the forms needed to apply for the economic disaster loan the same documents needed to apply for the PPP?
No, they're different documents.
Okay. Does the FFCRA kick in if the employee is under a stay-at-home order by the state? For example, not a quarantine ordered from the doctor?
Yes. Yeah. It's quarantined by a doctor. It's self-quarantined because of exposure or symptoms, and it's quarantined by a stay-at-home order.
Okay. Is it okay to apply for the PPP and the small business COVID-19 emergency grant from the state of Maryland?
The answer, I believe, is yes. That's a yes.
Okay. Let's see. We've answered about contractors. Is a salesperson's compensation based on salary alone or salary plus commissions?
Well, I looked at that very carefully last evening because I was asked that, and the language is rate of pay, and so in my mind I'm thinking that the rate of pay is you get $500 a week plus commission. That's your rate of pay, and the commission varies based on productivity. Then they go on to say the commissions are included in terms of determining the rate of pay. So I think you'd have to do an average, and that concerns me, as I mentioned during the presentation, because if somebody's off more than 25%, that could affect your forgiveness. So it's not making sense to me that they're meeting the objective of keeping people employed and keeping businesses viable, during this difficult period, without recognizing that sales are going to be down and people working on commission are going to have a decline in their revenue, but we want to keep them employed. So I think that's a clarification that's coming up. They do have that deadline that John mentioned, but they're giving guidance on a rolling basis. So every day there's stuff coming out. And that's a question that's been asked and hopefully will be answered.
Okay. We actually had a comment come in. I'll read it, and then if you have any additional color. It is very important to get the PPP application back to your banker before Friday. It is a first come, first served basis. I don't know if you have additional color on that.
Yeah, you can get it. The link's available. Get the application, fill it out. The sooner you get it, there's going to be a pile of them, so you want your pile to be, first, as soon as you can.
Somebody asked if they can get a copy of the webinar emailed for reference. The slides are posted in the webinar panel under handouts, and then the recording will be available both on our education site as well as out on the website under the podcasts and Community IQ. Is there any word on when more details will come out for the employees with for employers with less than 50 employees?
Some of these laws, like the Family First law, if you have less than 50 employees, you can ask for a waiver. Some of the laws with companies less than 50 can ask for waivers of some of these things. So that might apply to emergency paid sick leave and the extended family leave. That's the only thing I've seen in regard to companies with less than 50 people that's been a distinction.
Okay. Is there any way to track the status of applications?
I don't know.
I heard that the EDIL requires no personal guarantee up to 200,000, which is different than the information given here. Can you give any clarity on this number?
I will check on that. I had 25,000 from the materials I looked at. I hope it's 200,000.
Is the RSPA working on funds or grants to help out in areas outside of the SBA.org? John, I don't know if you want to address that.
Yep. We are not yet, but that's something that if we have the capability of doing it, meaning the wherewithal on our balance sheet, we will help where we can. At this point, we have not taken any of those steps because we, like you, are trying to do the best thing we can do to make sure that you have an association long into the future, and that's our focus as well. And I'll say one other thing, gang, that you should consider. Your customers are going to be navigating the same trail that you're navigating now. So as you start to put some miles on the odometer through these processes that can help your business, you'll be able to bring some unique value to your customers when you can share what's worked for you, what you've learned along the way, because in the end, we're all in this together. The retailers, the merchants are going through the exact same thing we're going through. So as you guys gain some insight, you'll have an opportunity to share that insight with your base.
Okay, back to Bob. Don't people need to be fired to claim unemployment? A previous question had asked about resignation. And then additionally, if you do that, doesn't that hinder your ability to take advantage of the PPP?
They've loosened those standards. So if you're unemployed as a result of COVID-15, you know what I mean. The question, if you resign, you're still eligible if you can show it's due to the crisis. Typically, if you were fired, you were eligible. They've opened that up.
What if there are employees no longer with the company prior to February 15th? How does that count?
Well, you'd still have it would be in the count. You could look at those three variable approaches to determining your count, but they would be included.
Okay. You said PPP loan forgiveness is based on employees we had last year to this year. Is it how many employees we had in December 2019 or later?
It's one of those three ways to determine the number of employees, being, I think it's the payroll period previous, the previous quarter, or an average of the year. There are three ways to do it. So you can figure out which is best for you and which gives you the best count for seeking forgiveness.
Okay.
And I'm sure your bank will work with you on that too.
If we use contractors, okay, so this is kind of a follow-up question to what we've been talking about, Bob. If we use contractors, do we include them in our payroll amount that we determine, or are you saying they can file on their own?
Yes and yes. Yes, we include contractors as part of your payroll expense. And two, yes, independent contractors can also file on their own for certain benefits.
Okay. Does the insurance reimbursement include work comp or life/disability paid by the company?
No, just healthcare insurance is the only one I've seen is healthcare.
Okay. Can you provide what the bank will require for documents when applying for the loans? I think we've said we're not sure about that yet.
I went through the list for the payment protection program, and on the disaster relief is on one of the slides.
Okay, so that information is in the presentation.
Yeah.
Let's see, we have a few more. We had 2 employees quit before the COVID-19 outbreak. Will those 2 employees count when determining if we employ the same number of people now?
Again, it depends which formula you use to determine your head count prior to February 15th.
Okay. Okay, in the interest of maximizing the forgiveness rate, is it permissible to put workers who cannot work remotely back on the payroll, yet not have them work for the 8-week period?
You could do that. Want to keep people employed, getting their compensation, and supporting the economy.
Okay. I have overseas-based contract employees. Can this be forgiven?
They don't count.
They don't count. Okay. Is furlough considered the same way as a layoff?
Well, we went through that last time. There's a lot of definitions, but typically a furlough is a reduction in hours or days of employment, and the person remains employed. Layoff is someone who's terminated, who's laid off with not a promise to come back.
Okay. And let's see. Okay, I think we have covered the majority of these. What if the employee is still working from home but minimized hours? Do they apply for the payroll protection?
Yes, and part of the forgiveness would be returning them to their compensation level, at least 75%.
Okay. Company deems essential and exempt, but the employee desires to honor the stay-in-place orders. Are they eligible for paid or sick leave? I'm sorry, are they eligible for paid sick leave?
Probably not under those circumstances. You could require them to use their PTO vacation or sick leave. I would not ever force an employee to do something they did not wish, but if they're not showing symptoms, if they've not been tested positive and they just don't want to come in under those circumstances, you'd proceed under your employee manual for what there is and how you address that.
Does the Paycheck Protection Program go directly to the bank, or do we know where those payments are sent?
I don't. I would assume it probably goes to the bank, but you're not going to be making payments for at least 8 weeks or longer.
Okay, if a person lives in a stay-at-home ordered state and they work for a company deemed essential, but we have no work for them, can they be covered by the RSPA?
Absolutely.
Okay. I've read that one of the goals of these loans is for the government to assume some ownership in businesses that take these loans if and when we cannot repay them. Is there any truth to that?
Yes, if you're an airline. It only applies to airlines and I think Boeing and a few others. It's the big boys that there's a whole section for them to get support. And they're now being asked by the Treasury how they're going to repay those and what they're going to give. It doesn't apply to us. No small businesses.
Okay. We are a foreign-owned U.S. corporation. Is it possible to qualify for PPP or EDIL without a personal guarantee from an owner with a Social Security number?
I think I talked to this person yesterday. If you have your own tax ID number, perhaps the person, the highest ranking person here in the United States could sign that. That's a good question. It's to cover U.S. operations, even though it's foreign owned. They haven't come out with guidance on that, but my guess would be that they would still protect the employees in the United States and provide these benefits to the business entity in the United States, provided it had its own tax ID number.
Okay. Just a few more. I know we're at 5 after 3. I think we just have a few more to cover. Understanding that the loans, that PP loans are first come, first served, but will the money run out for those that don't get their application in early?
Conceivable, but Congress would add on to that. Congress would love to see the full, 300 million or so used. They'll add on to it.
Okay.
But don't procrastinate.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, I just said don't procrastinate.
Okay. Is the PP form done on paper or is it all online?
You could do either way. I think the preference was that it's done online. It'd be more, it'd be faster, but you can do it either way.
How do employers with less than 50 employees apply for a waiver for the Family First law?
Go to the SBA site. There is a procedure for it. I have not done one yet.
Okay. Are there any special handling rules for a new hire that was employed 26 days prior to layoff?
No. Okay. Not that I can think. Any special rules? Some 26 days prior to layoff. I assume they're an at-will employee. My initial concern was people who had offers before the crisis hit to start after the crisis hit. In that instance, that could be problematic.
If business reduces compensation less than 25% for all employees, how do you account for the difference between exempt and non-exempt?
There is no difference. If you say all employees and reduce them all 25%, you still would be in line for the forgiveness, and there's no distinction. Making $100,000 a year, which would be the maximum, you reduce me 25% to 75,000. That would just go into my payroll computation.
Is the PPP count based on quantity of employees or amount of payroll dollars?
Number of employees.
Okay.
They also consider the payroll in terms of the second factor, in terms of the 25% reduction. So they're looking at both.
Okay. What if a company has 0 employees, owners only, and no payroll?
I don't know what the question is. You have 0 employees, no payroll. Are you looking, can you qualify for PPP? Yeah. No payroll. You're going to have some of those factors.
Okay. I think we covered that one. Can you please re-explain which programs you cannot double dip from?
It basically would be the Family First, the paid sick leave, the payment protection program, and the you could get a disaster loan, but the benefits from the payment protection would be rolled into that, or the loan from that would be rolled into that loan. The double dipping's not on the program, it's on the benefit. So if you have a benefit where you're getting compensated or a tax credit for somebody who's on leave, you can't get that under more than one program for the same period of the same individuals. That's what it is. It's possible you may qualify under different circumstances and exclude those things, but you can't double dip. So if you were getting a Family First and took the credit there, then that money would be excluded when you go to your forgiveness under your payment protection plan program.
Okay. Any advice for owners if the business is closed due to stay-at-home order about how they open the business and pay people?
Yep, if they could do a payment protection, bring them all back, pay them, get a loan, and hopefully you could do some remote work and help. This stay at home, at least what the United States, April 30th. Now it's not stay at home for everyone, but social distancing. It's going to go on for a while.
We pay all our staff on salary. Theoretically, if we adjust all salaries down by less than 25%, then we should still be eligible for forgiveness loans, correct?
Correct.
Okay. If an employee takes the family leave law and the business gets the payroll tax deduction, can they also take the payroll mortgage, et cetera? Can they take the payroll mortgage or other type of loan?
Now that would be a double dip for that portion of it.
Okay. And are there any fees to apply for the loan or for the grant?
Are there any what? I didn't hear.
Fees. I'm sorry, fees.
No, none whatsoever. There's no fees at all. SBA is paying all the fees to the bank.
Okay. All right, I've got two more. Okay, I think we covered this one. I'm pretty sure we did, but it's come in a couple times, so we'll repeat it. If a person lives in a stay-at-home ordered state and they work for an essential company, but we have no work for them, can they be covered by the FFRCA?
Yes.
Okay. And we have already laid off 10 people and we bring them all back on June 29th, not before. Do we get the full forgiveness of the PPP loan, or is the amount of forgiveness based on the actual amount of wages we paid during April, May, and June?
If you brought them all back, you'd be rewarded. That's the goal.
When figuring out payroll for existing employees and the PPP, are we assuming that all hourly employees will make 40 hours per week?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, typing this again, last one. I know we've covered this, I think. We have a contract with a company who employs an individual that develops software for us. We 1099 the company. Does that count as an independent contractor?
Yes, most likely, yes. 1099.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all.
All right.
Questions?
Thank you, everybody. Again, the PowerPoint and the recording for the webinar will be posted on the RSPA website. If you did not have a chance to download the PDF included on the panel for this webinar, please feel free to do that before you exit the webinar. And if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Bob or to the RSPA. Thank you.